Liverpool 1-6, and that's all down to David Ornstein in an article for the New York Times, which is also The Athletic, which is also pretty much David Ornstein, this great guy. And I'm going to tell you why David is so important to this in just a second. David tends to be pretty good for Liverpool information. And Liverpool have apparently told him that after returning from pre-season and with this game against Sevilla coming up in just a couple of days, just under a week, Arne Slot and Liverpool have decided that they would quite like to look at some sixes in the market. And it seems from information previously as if this was always the plan anyway. Get the assessment done of the team, who it is that Slot wants to work with or can work with or feels has that ability that he can take even further. And then when they get back, take a look at some of these targets, which they, by the way, they were probably already looking at anyway. Email exists, texts exist. At the moment, we've seen Slot play Endo, Dominik Szoboszlai and Ryan Gravenberch at that 6, and a couple of other guys in the second half of games, but realistically those were the starting guys they played in those positions. And they've begun their search and then concluded their search and now have apparently identified a target who apparently sits outside the Premier League. So what I've done, if I zoom out just here, is map these guys out into different tiers as to who I think suits that profile, but also would just fit Liverpool in general. And after the live stream we did yesterday, yes, we do live streams on this channel. Subscribe if you've not already hit that subscribe button. I think we identified a couple more as well that I want to go through. These, by the way, are my core 4. Ederson, Ugarte, Varela, Alan Varela, we'll talk about that more in a second, and Zubimendi. Where do we start? Well, I think it's probably good to start with Ugarte, right? Ugarte, there's this heat map, just for anyone who wants the reference of it. Great high playmaking presser, plays really well in the PSG team that obviously have dominated not only in Europe but also in Liga for a little while, but that is also a bit of a concern for me as well. There's about a £60 million price tag on him. Apparently isn't going to be met by Manchester United, which I do find interesting considering they desperately need a player of his profile. And as you can see, he's a little more on the front foot in this PSG team. So again, wondering if that 60 million is going to be a valid price tag. But he is a very valuable player to PSG and obviously to his national side as well. So if you're able to get a South American, which seems to be one of the great things at the moment, into your team playing the 6, and the 6 is specifically what I think they want him to play, then by all means, get on it. Having said that, there are some other great, maybe slightly more reasonably priced players in Europe. I don't think Ugarte will be top of Liverpool's list, and the fact that we've now said they've identified him makes me think it's not him. I may be wrong, but makes me think it's not him. My second option, Ederson. I love Ederson, I love Atalanta. Overall, I just love what it is that Liverpool would achieve if they had Ederson in the team. He's a bit more of a front foot player, let's look at that. And he's slightly more all over the field. He's slightly more supportive of the players around him. That's possibly because of what we've seen of him at Atalanta. But I also think he's the kind of guy that would fit really well into Liverpool's team. He's got that forward-thinking element to him. He's also very good in a standing tackle, really good at winning the ball back, which obviously you would expect a lot of these 6s to be, but he's really good at doing it from a standing position. He's also great at recovery tackles, really good at covering off his centre-backs when they need to be covered, and would be a great interchange player for someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold. There is someone else, by the way, in the Atalanta team that on the live stream yesterday we looked at, and it was Scalvini. Slightly more lopsided in his heat map, but I will give him the benefit of the doubt because he does play in a slightly unusual side. Maybe the Italian flag is slightly off-putting because apparently there are a lot of Italian players that take a little time to, should we say, acclimatise to the Premier League. But overall, I would say he's not a decent signing. He's a good signing. He would cover for Trent relatively well. Would actually play quite nicely on that right side of the 6. I'm not saying he's my #1 target, but I'm saying he's someone who's worth keeping an eye on, especially if you're talking about players who slip under the radar. 2 guys who certainly haven't slipped under the radar. Alan Varela. First of all, wondering if it is just David Ornstein cosplaying. Because this guy looks spookily like the guy who's putting the headlines out there. Does David Ornstein just need a little back pocket cash in the summer? Look at that, that's uncanny. Having said that, he is also a great player. Great heat map, obviously, and I think when you look at him in terms of his skills and the ideas that he could play with, and the fact that Liverpool have had pretty decent luck recently when signing from Portugal, he fits. And he's audacious, he's the kind of player that you want because he's got that kind of jawline, he's got the beard that you want, it would look incredible in that Liverpool team in the first place. I personally would put him at the top of my list, only because I think we'd be able to get him for a price that I think would be reasonable at this point. I also think he compares relatively favourably to all the other players, and I think we get him without much fuss. He's also in quite a dominant team at the moment, and I want our team to be more dominant. Speaking of dominant sides, let's talk ظubimendi, the last of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, if you are a number 6 in the league. ظubimendi was identified by Arsenal not long ago as one of the players that they would quite like to identify as a player. They went, hey, we'd quite like to identify you. He said, you've identified me, what now? They said, do you want to come to the club? They said, we're going to be letting go of a couple of players this summer. He probably won't be one of them. Again, there's his heat map. Don't know how much that means to you. Apparently, again, one of those players who hates to step on the halfway line. Having said all of that, I think Liverpool would look incredibly good with him in their midfield. He's really good at the pressing, he's got the technical ability, he plays in a side who definitely would translate very well to the Premier League in the first place. His distribution, he's definitely a bit more lopsided towards the right, which would suit Liverpool really well because I think there are plenty of players that could be a bit more left-hand side. He's got the ability to play as a 1 or as part of a double pivot, and he's definitely got a technical ability which I think would translate well to the Premier League. Another option, Adam Wharton. This is like my next band of players in the Premier League, right? He is very good at pressing. He's a playmaker. Still quite young. Again, got that right-hand-sided, lopsided feel to him because he's always played in the midfield with like the Hughes types, but I don't mind it overall as a profile. I think at this point he'd be slightly overpriced, closing in on that 100 million because of his nationality. I also think Liverpool have probably got better options or could manufacture something from their own background. And I also just think paying that much for a player, maybe if we know that an English player is going to leave, then sure. I'm not sure what this means, by the way, for Liverpool if they do sign an English player. I do wonder if it means that they're signposting that Trent in the end may leave. More on players possibly leaving because Liverpool are signing players later in the day. We then get another band of players. Players who I think are slightly more obscure, maybe no less obscure than some of these guys, but just slightly less profile, and therefore you won't know them, and I probably won't know them in the same fashion as we might have recognised some of these guys up here. By the way, my pick of these, still Ederson. Think he's available for the best price. Think he's a charismatic guy. Also, just love the way that he plays. I think he's really inventive, forward-thinking, would combine really well with other Liverpool players. Wouldn't be upset if we also got Allen. Also because I can say Alan. Alan's having a bit of a renaissance as a name. Although I imagine that's probably because none of the people, when naming Alan Varela, would have known the Alans that I knew when I was younger. I can't imagine that someone, such as this Alan, knew Alan in IT. Just saying. And let's just take a look at why Liverpool were 1 to 6. I know it feels a little bit weird to say why would Liverpool 1 to 6 when it seems very evident that that is one of the I guess spots in the squad that they could upgrade. Endo is a fantastic player, but there are certainly other elements that another 6 will bring in, as we're profiling right now. This is twofold. First of all, this is the starting 11, right? And that I think that's very reasonable. And those are what you would have like the starting position on television. But what a 6 with a different ability or an enhanced ability, in contrast to the one that Endo already brings, which I think is a great defensive 6, is they would definitely have to start on this side because they'd need the interchangeability with someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold. I think they'd need to be able to protect Konate or Quansah just behind them. And I also think you want someone who's able to bring the ball forward and slip into these areas. And that is maybe where Endo, I'm not saying he doesn't have any ability. I think we've seen lots of really great things from Endo during his cult status time at Liverpool. But let's be honest, like there are plenty of times where you think, oh, what could we have done if this guy could do this? And that's not a lack of gratitude, it's wanting to take the team to the very top level. So yeah, sure, Trent might play on this side, which would probably be slightly annoying for anyone who comes in the 6. But maybe Liverpool have got other plans for Trent, and maybe that's partially why we're bringing in this 6. Or maybe it's that we want a more out-and-out 6, someone who can combine well with Trent, therefore moving someone like McAllister forward. And we're looking for someone who can sit alone at the base of that midfield while Trent wanders ahead of them in an almost diamond-y type shape, right? Maybe that's something that someone like Slot could facilitate. We've not just seen one formation in pre-season, we've seen quite a few of them. And whilst you've got this double pivot here, what happens if you bring in a box that looks more like that, and especially when Liverpool are going to be a more dominant side moving down the field here, and Alisson or Kelleher, or whichever goalkeeper it is that we end up playing with, can push the play a little further downfield. That is what we're going to need to do this season a lot more. So we've seen the starting 11, but when we've got control, when we're not, you know, sitting there going, okay, let's just see what the TV looks like, there's going to be a sitting six there. There's going to be someone who needs to facilitate what Trent does, what Szoboszlai does, what McAllister does. And if they can sit alone and give Liverpool numerical advantages even further down the field, sure, Endo can do that. But what if they need to then be able to bring the ball forward and need to be able to interchange with a McAllister or someone like that? That's an Ederson type. That's possibly even an Ugarte type, I'd say. And that is where I think the six is changing. It's not just someone who sits. We've seen this in Thomas Partey, we've seen this in Rodri. They need to have these other abilities that plenty of people know a 6 come 8 could possibly have. But, you know, we need that to be Endo 2.0. We need that to be like an upgrade on Endo. I don't think that's unfair to say about him. And we said this yesterday on the live stream, right? You've got a double pivot, which works really well, and that can work really well in possession. But one guy can come and get possession, one guy can drop a little further down the field. They're trying to drop in between the lines to receive and move the ball on very quickly, or receive and then turn with the ball. A number of those top transfer targets, that 4 that I showed you, can all do that. That would be a different profile to someone like Trent. And it would mean that Liverpool want to carry the ball in a slightly different way. We're going to have to move away from this idea that, hey, these players were Klopp players and they play in these positions, because they're not going to be playing in those same positions. Sure, as a starting 11, you have rough positions that when you're in defence, when you're attacking, you're going to take up, so players know where the ball is going to go. But what happens when you then get the ball is you need to read the game under slot, and you need to work out whether you are carrying or whether you're dinging it out wide or whatever it is. That's going to work really well for this Liverpool team. I just think it's worth laying that out tactically now to get away from this idea that the 6 is just going to be that sitting 6 there, and that when Liverpool, who are a much more dominant side, we need to have that solution, have the ball, we're going to need to move down the field like this, possibly even creating boxes with Trent like that, possibly having a single holding 6 who can empower that 3 just ahead of him. It's going to be interesting to see the way they slot together. Let me know what you guys think on my theory. Back to the profile. Let's talk about this next band of players. This next band of players, like I said, slightly more obscure. We've profiled some of them on the channel already, and some of them came up yesterday in the live stream. First on, Morten Frundrup. We've already spoken about him on the channel. I think what we found was he was maybe a slightly, I don't think he's a weaker option. I just think he's not, first of all, he's not as experienced as some of these other players. I would worry about the translation to the league, and I'd also worry about him not quite being the finished product yet. It's certainly obscure enough to be a Liverpool signing, though, and certainly obscure enough to be within those profiles of players where you go, yeah, you fit that weird signing set. Got that Northern European thing going on, could fit it quite well. Overall, little too light on the ball for me, but would be interested to see what he can do. After watching the compilations, I do like the way he wins the ball back. I do like the Endo. I think he profiles similarly to Endo, but is slightly younger, would be what I would say. And that maybe gives him a higher ceiling, and maybe what it means for Endo is if we do get someone like him, which I think ultimately we will, we're probably moving someone like Endo on for a reasonable price, around 15 to 20 million euros. Let's talk about another guy who's Northern European. Yep, that's right, it's Hjulmand. Plays for Sporting, which again, some of you probably will have taken an interest in Sporting more recently, considering we wanted their manager apparently not long ago, but he didn't want that structure of club, so in the end Liverpool decided to go in another direction. Personally, I think he, especially when you're looking at his heat map and his stats and those kind of things, I think he profiles really well for Liverpool. Again, more right-sided than left-sided, which works really well for me. I think he can definitely fit into our midfield in that we need that physicality, we need that height, we need a little bit of ball winning in there in terms of someone who can get up and head the ball. But I always think, actually, people look at aerial duels quite a lot. Liverpool have become very good in utilising players who aren't particularly tall to win the ball back anyway, because what they realised was it's not about winning that header, it's about winning the ball once it's come back on the ground. So aerial duels isn't always something I'm overly bothered about, but maybe that's something that we've identified after the pre-season slot, especially with a high-pressing team that want to win the ball back and get the pressure we need in the side. Speaking of which, let's go for an Italian who is a Juve player but has played for Lazio, Ravella. I don't know how well he would translate over to the Premier League at this point. I think he's slightly too obscure. I think he's the kind of player that Liverpool, I mean, if we were to get him, I'd sort of go, okay, you must have a plan for him, because I can't see where else you would, can't see why else we would get him. Personally, I think he's probably lower down the list for me, but if someone like Arne and Richard Hughes profile him, then sure, I'm all in. Let's talk next Fofana. Able to be a single or double pivot. Again, more right-hand sided, maybe slightly more attacking than we need, but maybe we do need that adaptable, like I was saying yesterday on the live stream, adaptable 8 that can carry the ball forward. He's more of a 6-8 rather than an out-and-out 6. Speaking of which, this guy, Magassa, came up on the stream yesterday. This was his heat map, mainly because I think he's been asked to play quite an adaptable role for this Monaco side, but actually, this is more of his heat map. He played as like a double pivot, guess who alongside, bam. This was them against Nantes, I think. I'm not sure that, I think there's more of a like, hey, you could be a left-sided player for us. Are you going to be good? I mean, are you going to be good in the way that we want to profile our 6? Probably not, because Curtis Jones already plays over there. McAllister already plays over there. Whoever's going to be playing alongside the 6, which ultimately I think, based it on my calculations of where Trent should play, would be over here rather than over here. I'm not sure he fits the profile, but I wanted to put him in there because I saw so many mentions of him the other day, and I think a lot of people have kind of gotten quite excited about him. Which leads me on to proven or previous targets. Proven, this guy, captain, leader, legend, which is exactly the way that I would hate to describe him. I think he is all of those things, but I just think it's a bit cliched. Jordan Henderson. Jordan, come back. We miss you. You're still good. And I think you've done a great job for Ajax. I'm just saying. Here he is with a load of blood in his mouth. Don't quite know why. Ajax, what have you done to this guy? Yeah, that's not a realistic one for us. But he was good in his time. Just wanted to mention him. A few people disrespected him. I think England missed him at the Euros. Ruben Neves went to waste some of his career, but now he's on his way back, apparently. This was his last heat map in the Premier League. Skewed more to the right-hand side. Inventive, dynamic, can carry the ball, wins it back really well. Had some good games against Liverpool. Had some bad games against Liverpool. I think would be great for us. Joshua Kimmich. What do you think? Not against it. Nice heat map, works really well. What else can we do with him? Just saying. I'm finished. Andre. Sits too deep for me. Not the player I put in profile-wise. Probably not the guy to bring in. At one point, exciting for a Klopp side. Now, less so. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Who do you think we should sign as a 6? I'd be really interested to know. I think it means the end of the road for probably Endo if they come into the side. I'd be interested to know how you would profile them. More on this later in the day, more on goalkeepers later in the day, and I'll chat to you guys in a little while. Much love.